when I debated Dan Barker, University of Illinois, did I present evidence? I did. But how did I do it? I started off by saying, before I presented the evidence, for example, of design, so plainly found in the mitochondria of all of our cells, I said, I'm not inviting you to sit in judgment over the creator who made these things. I am presenting you this evidence to demonstrate the inconsistency of your rejection of the God you already know exists. And so, as I said on Twitter yesterday, the issue, even Van Til says in his own writings, even Van Til says, I'm not against theistic proofs. It's how you formulate them and what you're doing with them. If you formulate them as if there is a naturalistic, neutral mechanism of looking at the world that doesn't start with God, then I'm going to reject that. And we don't have time to go into it today, but if you go back, and I don't know the search would bring this up, but many times over the years, I have pointed out that the best formulation of the cosmological argument that I've ever seen was in a book, an intro book on philosophy by Rowe, R-O-W-E. And the conclusion of that particular article was, this would be a valid argument if we could demonstrate that its foundation is universally binding. And what did he identify as its foundation? It's called PSR, the principle of sufficient reason. And the principle of sufficient reason is where you've got a connection between what he's talking about and what Van Til's talking about. The grounding of PSR is in the created world that God made. So there's you see the connection there. But his point, obviously, is that when you make your argument, let's say you have a form of the cosmological argument you want to use, are you presenting it to the rebel sinner as if you are approving of the fact that they have climbed their little tushy up onto the throne, the judgment seat, and they are pretending that they have the capacity to judge whether they are pots or not? If you present yourself in such a way that you are encouraging their belief in their own autonomy, there's the issue. There's the problem. And that's a theological problem, because many of you have a theology of the gospel that starts with the fact that they are autonomous. And that God cannot take out their heart of stone. Their heart of stone has to be convinced to leave on its own. This kind of foolishness. That's why I say, when I hear non-reformed guys trying to borrow transcendental argumentation from the presuppositional system, I just chuckle. It's like, keep going, guys. Keep going. You'll figure out what's behind this, Way to go. But they're being inconsistent. And you want to have your theology and your apologetic communicating the same thing. And that's what Van Til is helping us to try to do. And that's why when people, what did I do with it? Oh, Van Til and the use of evidence. There are people that you can't use evidence, you're a Van Tilian. No. The whole point of Van Til is everything, if it exists, is evidence of God because it came from his hand. But you don't sit there and put man in the judgment seat and say to him, here, let me give you some more evidence. Now will you believe? Because he's already holding down katakanton, Romans 1, suppressing the knowledge of God. He's holding it down with all he can already. So you give him some more, and he just makes a little room and holds that down too. What you've got to do is you've got to start prying those fingers up by showing him the inconsistency of the fact he lives in God's world. He's stealing from God to hold his worldview together. And you hope and pray that the Spirit of God will use